Hello, everyone. I welcome you all to this session where we will dive into the emerging world of responsible generative AI and understand that how can we utilize the potential of this game-changing technology while staying responsible and ethical. A quick intro about me. I'm Monica Kothari, an IT professional with over 20 years of experience while working with tech giants like Amazon, Yahoo, and Informatica. I'm also an artist and founder of Dare to Express. As far as this session is concerned, I bring expertise from developing AI products at Amazon and current consulting experience with a couple of organizations who are venturing into GenAI space. And this session is driven by my personal interest and commitment to ongoing learning and sharing the same with the community. Okay, so let's get started. If you have been following the research and the latest developments, you will be aware that during this year and past year, government, industries, and researchers, or let's say policymakers, are exceptionally concerned about the speed with which this technology is growing, and also the potential ways that it could make our world unequal without we being ready for managing any sort of risks. So it's all the more important for us to understand the implications of what we build and also be aware of the probable challenges that we can contribute to while we build these products. So this webinar is a small effort to generate the awareness around the same. What are we going to cover? Throughout this session, we will navigate the GenAI landscape, understanding the common terms, and then diving into the risk, challenges, and the best practices and frameworks that pioneers like Google or Microsoft are using for building these products, responsibly. And of course, like what role can you play, whether you are a business owner or let's say in engineering, developing these solutions, or a consumer who uses these solutions to improve his day-to-day life. Let's talk about few basic terms to get everyone on the same page. So what is generative AI? It is a form of creative artificial intelligence that can create content using natural language input. Unlike a primitive AI, where we were simply analyzing or classifying the existing data, generative AI can create something entirely new, whether it's text, images, audio, videos, anything using technologies such as deep learning or reinforcement learning or transformers. ChatGPT, I'm presuming everyone has experienced it. It's developed by OpenAI, and it is an advanced language model, which is built on GPT, which is generative pre-trained transformer architecture. You can ask it to explain a subject, write an essay, run a calculation, generate some Python code, or simply have a conversation. Then there are foundation models, something like BERT or Gemini, DALI, GPT-4. These are all complex machine learning systems which are trained on vast quantities of data. It could be text, images, audio on a massive scale, and these can be fine-tuned. Then there is large language models, which kind of represent a subset of the foundation models that have been pre-trained on extensive data sets, and they can understand, summarize, and generate high-quality text. For example, GPT-3 from OpenAI was trained on almost 500 billion words from millions of websites. And I think its successor, GPT-4, is kind of a multi-model that can take images as well along with the text. Some others could be DALI and Stable Diffusion, which are image generation models, or BARD by Google, or Llama by Meta. There's another term which we come across often in this space, is fine-tuning. It's a very common process these days where a foundation model is retrained for specific tasks to adapt to your requirements. For example, you can transform the model to generate the content for medical queries by refining its understanding of medical language and concepts. And then there's prompt engineering, which is a technique for developing and optimizing the prompts to efficiently use LLMs. So you can imagine it like giving smart instructions to AI. Anything that we provide as an input, say, for example, into ChatGPT, making it better at understanding and answering the questions and getting the responses that you want is prompt engineering. So prompt engineers is claimed to be an emerging role in GenAI world, and there are various courses which are available in the market today to make you a professional around this. Okay, as with great power comes great responsibility. GenAI also comes with its risks, and understanding its risks is crucial to effectively navigate and address the challenges that come with this powerful technology. So, for me, when I speak to executives today, there is a lot of enthusiasm and excitement to get started with GenAI, but they're still hesitant about the challenges associated with implementing GenAI. Not to mention the dramatic, headlines claiming the end of humanity as we know it. Before we get into this, a small disclaimer here. Throughout this discussion from now on, you will hear me use terms like GenAI and AI interchangeably. And the reason being that GenAI kind of falls under the broader spectrum of AI, and a lot of things are common for both. So there are some peculiarities like, GenAI will amplify the existing risks due to its ability to generate diverse outputs, which we do not have control on. I'll kind of cover them too. All right, so let's talk about most important risks of GenAI. The first one is deepfakes and misinformation. This was going viral on social media last week with a celebrity video, which was an identity theft and not actually the person themselves. So you can consider the idea of deepfakes as tools that might create a persona or avatar that's pretending to be a trusted person in your organization, which is giving fraudulent information to, let's say, your customers, or even advising them to take potentially risky courses or actions. Then there's hallucinations. You can call it like error with confidence. There are kind of many examples in the news already where GenAI systems don't know the answer and they just come up with their own story, which seems to be factual, but it is not. For example, ChatGPT invented a sexual harassment scandal about a real law professor, which started to make rounds on social media before it was debunked. Very unfortunate example of hurting someone's reputation. I came across Bible while preparing the PPT where it started coming up with, tools and technologies which didn't exist. And I had to go and double check those. Um, then there is bias and discrimination. So AI kind of picks up biases from the data that it's trained on, which is, mirroring the human prejudices which are already found in the data. So for example, while I was working at Amazon in 2014-15, Amazon had come up with an HR tool which was based on AI, and they were using data sets that were kind of skewed male, and they ended up scrapping their hiring tool because it started discriminating against women, and the AI could not unlearn the bias that it had developed. So yes, it is a very critical risk that one needs to address. And later changing it would be very difficult. Then there is societal impact. So GenAI definitely has the potential to reshape our society. A humanists kind of worry that it is going to influence how we work, we communicate, and make decisions. Issues such as deepening the social inequalities, let's say cultural biases, and unintended consequences on marginal communities are significant concerns with humanists talk about. Then there is explainability or transparency. GenAI models are complex, and it's kind of difficult to understand how they really, arrive at specific decisions, right? And which is critical for gaining the trust of the customers. The black box nature of these models built on the deep neural networks, along with billions of parameters which go into these systems, kind of makes it difficult to explain the outputs. And it raises the concerns about, accountability and its ethical use. Copyright issues are issues about ownership. Who owns the idea and the products that are created by GenAI? There's a big discussion on artists and creative professions with many lawsuits currently running today. Not only the ownership disputes, there are broader legal concerns as well. For example, if an AI produces content that infringes on copyright or violates these laws, who is actually going to be responsible? Is it the creator, or is it the AI developer, or the organization who is employing the AI, or let's say a third party whose model you were using in your application? A lot of work is going on these areas to define how we can actually have certain policies in place which could help out. Then there's security. These models are complex enough that there is a significant degree of memorization that goes in on when you train them. So this implies that if we expose the document, let's say while fine tuning, or there's RAG which is happening these days to these models. And so, if that confidential data is given to, let's say, a third party hosting these models, they may, in fact, incorporate that into future versions of their models. Um, yeah, and then there's another security risk that can come from prompt injection. For example, an attacker who strategically, he crafts the prompts to manipulate and distort the AI model's outputs. And it's important to prevent data breaches, system compromises, or other malicious activities due to these kind of security vulnerabilities that can arise. Last but not the least, privacy is very, very key. If any sort of PII or personally identifiable information is mishandled in the input process, it may become part of the training data set. And as a result, you can expose the organization to compliance risk and legal liability, and it can damage the organization's reputation. The same is the case with the output which gets generated by these systems. For example, let's say a doctor is trying to use ChatGPT to write his clinical notes, and he may unintentionally, violate HIPAA compliance. Or, for example, developers are using GitHub Copilot, which is such a common thing, may accidentally contribute proprietary data to model. Right. So, I think I hope with this slide we were able to understand the potential risks which were associated with GenAI. And it's not really as bad as these risks are being called out. Yes, it is, but definitely we have made a lot of progress in terms of how to mitigate these. So let's shift our focus to proactive measures like responsible AI, which becomes a guiding light, steering us towards the ethical and responsible development and deployment of these AI solutions. So the first thing is, what is responsible AI? So while I was researching a lot of these, this side of the spectrum, there's no universal definition of responsible AI, nor there is like a simple checklist or formula that you can define responsible AI practices to be or how they should be implemented. Every organization is kind of developing its own AI principles and frameworks which align with their mission and values. So came across a generic definition which kind of is being used at many organizations. So responsible AI is the practice of designing, developing, and deploying AI in a safe, legal, and ethical way in accordance with clear principles to empower the businesses, respect people, and benefit society. Very important, benefit society. Okay, so what kind of principles are we talking about here, right? So there are a few core principles of RAI that extend beyond just the technical aspects, and they also focus on the organizational and cultural dimensions of AI adoption. So any organization can utilize them while defining their AI strategy. So I've kind of listed six here, but the space is very much evolving. So, more can be added. But let's talk about these key ones. There is first, which is accountability and professional responsibility, where including us, anyone who designs, develops, or deploys these AI systems has a professional responsibility towards not only his customers, but also society. So it is important to work with a range of stakeholders who would critically question and evaluate the AI system, actively considering just the short term benefit, but the long term and societal impacts, and also responsibly acting on those considerations, even if it could mean that you don't design that AI system. because it has its potential risks. Um, Second one I would like to call out is fairness, just like non-discrimination. Kind of spoke about this already in the risks. AI should treat everyone equally, avoiding biases or discrimination, which are based on personal characteristics, which can kind of occur because of the training data being skewed or has imbalances in, let's say, sample size or lacks diversity in relevant features. The third one is explainability or transparency. So think of a bank, right, that might be using an AI system to decide whether a person is creditworthy. And it's important that that bank should be able to explain it to the customer why his loan was not really right. So organizations need to focus on mechanisms to promote appropriate processes and tools which are related to model development and deployment. For example, using responsible AI dashboard and scorecard in MS Azure, one can look at the global and local model behavior to understand how these model came to, their decision about some specific request. So there are tools and technologies available. We'll talk about those in the upcoming slides. Then thirdly, there is human control and judgment. So it is very important to strike the right balance between AI capabilities and human judgment. For example, for let's say high stake decision making in healthcare, that would mean that a doctor should review the test or diagnosis, which is suggested by AI, before passing it to the patient. This involvement could include human in the loop, where humans play an active role in the decision making process alongside the AI system. Or you could use other mechanism like human on the loop or human over the loop approaches based on use case by use case basis. Then there's privacy and security. We spoke already about it in the risk section, and we will talk more about it when we discuss the framework. Then there is reliability and safety. So, to build trust, AI systems must operate reliably, safely, and consistently. So, developers can implement continuous testing and monitoring to assess whether an AI system is performing reliably through tools, feedback mechanisms, let's say surveys, or user experience evaluations. For high risk systems like self driving cars, I think developers should implement AI risk or impact assessment to identify potential safety risks and necessary mitigations. Okay, so how would your organization? Okay, so now that we know what are these core principles for responsible AI, how would your organization put these principles into practice to make clear ethical decisions while building the products using GenAI? So there are many frameworks that allow you to think responsibly and ethically while you design, implement, and deploy the AI products. Here I'm sharing a framework that might work well for both technologists and non-technologists. The five pillars of this framework are strategy, people, governance, control and monitoring mechanisms, and responsible data practices. And they're not in any order of priority. Let's look at each of these. So the first one is strategy. Organizations and leaders need to come up with a well-defined holistic strategy after performing, the risk analysis from the get-go. So, you need to identify the core principles that your organization would want to, base their objectives on. What will be the people impact? When you start using these principles, what are the process transformations? Let's say, what are the infrastructure upgrades? Any of these, like a very holistic view of thinking about the whole strategy. It might be important to also determine whether you would want to revamp the existing offerings or create new revenue models, or maybe reshape the workforce with new skills. The other thing is very important is that you might need to ask the question that where should GenAI be really applied? So one needs to be very cautious because if you have a hammer, everything can start looking like a nail, right? So GenAI is not really a one size fits all solution for all AI related tasks. It it is most effective when you want a good starting point, like creating a first draft of a sales plan, which you could then enhance with personal insights. But say if you are looking at a very precise and verifiable outcomes, maybe like something in a financial report, GenAI might not be the ideal pick. The other important thing that organizations need to think about is sustainability, and use some sort of sustainable practices by integrating, let's say, the environmental, social, and economic considerations into the entire AI development lifecycle. um, you could probably minimize the carbon footprint which is associated with AI infrastructure and operations, for example. So that's about the strategy. Second one is people, right? So for any project, which you would it'll be good idea to have a multidisciplinary team with diverse expertise, that would include, let's say, AI specialists, your data scientists, maybe ethicists, legal professionals, and definitely the domain experts. So this will ensure that you are actually responsibly developing the whole product, because this team would be having a well-rounded understanding of AI technologies, will think responsibly, will have legal frameworks where they will evaluate stuff, and also will think about the specific domains in which the AI should actually be deployed. You can have dedicated central orgs. For example, Microsoft has defined RAI focus groups dedicated to their core RAI principles, which plays a key role in developing tools, best practices, and you know tailored implementation guidance related to their respective areas of expertise. Other thing you can think about is, we already organizations would be having red teams, right? Red teaming is a strategy that we often use today to find security vulnerabilities in our system. One could extend this team to find harmful content from GenAI. And this team could implement a responsible AI process that builds on and complements the existing cybersecurity practices. Another important aspect, which is key here, is you might want to prioritize the skill set transformation in terms of not only the technical aspects, but also ethical consideration as well. So, training the employees who design or use AI systems to understand the models and data sources, let's say identifying bias in the data sets or AI recommendations, privacy protection, or somebody who can report performance issues. So basically, it should go beyond the AI developers and data scientists, and encompass all the employees, stakeholders, and the wider community who would be trained on all of these aspects. I kind of also have seen what works is creating an internal resource that includes the guidelines, the best practices, or let's say the case studies, documentations, and examples of responsible AI implementation. Third thing is governance. So top leadership should define and lead an organization's responsible AI principles, which you can translate basically. You could translate all of those into an effective governance structure for your organization. So this structure could basically involve creating clear policies and guidelines which are aligning with the legal requirements, ethical norms, let's say regulatory compliance, industry standards, all of those parts. And these frameworks should adopt, should kind of be flexible enough to change as the legal landscape is evolving right now, and may involve, dedicated ethics review boards overseeing the AI projects who could evaluate risks and also monitor ethical implications. Then there is control and monitoring mechanisms, very, very important, because we definitely need accountability, continuous testing, and monitoring mechanisms to really understand the potential unintended issues and then put the controls in place to mitigate them. This could mean that you have rigorous testing and pilots before the deployment. You're conducting regular audits of the AI system, monitoring the AI systems in real time, as and when the model will drift and decay over a period of time, building the human control mechanisms, and also implementing accountability processes for employees as well. So, when it comes to establishing guardrails, if I talk about, it would involve basically defining your boundaries and constraints for AI models. It could be both in terms of your input data and output response. So, for example, Bing applies the external guardrails. So, like a second model that looks at the output of the LLM and decides whether it's acceptable or not. So, in the case of death threat, the LLM model actually outputs the death threat, and the second model evaluates it as a harmful content and removes it. It's like an agent looking over an agent. Other way could be to use Azure's OpenAI services content filter support, right? That apply criteria to suppress the prompts and responses based on the classification of content into different categories of harms or severity. So there are tools available today which should be used. Then you could also apply input-output validation at UI layer to constrain the inputs to specific subjects. So that's one way. Another way could be using meta prompts. For example, OpenAI's API allow you to provide a system parameter that sets the behavior of the model. So you can basically tell ChatGPT to act like a marketing consultant. So it kind of restricts, the responses that it is going to probably spit out. Then the fifth and the other last important pillar is responsible data practices, very important in the data layer. So any product is only as ethical as the underlying data that it's trained on. For example, if the majority of your customers to date have been of a particular race or gender, when we train, on that particular data, we'll continue to design the product and services that only serves the need of that particular population. So it'll bring in the bias automatically into the system. So as you are deploying any new tool, one should ask, what is the source of this training data? How might the data perpetuate historic bias? What has been done to reduce that bias in the data? So a lot of work on the data layer is very, very key. They say 80% of the work on any building any AI systems is actually on the data side, right? Organizations should incorporate representative data sets encompassing a wide range of perspectives, backgrounds, demographics, which can help mitigate bias. Secondly, it's also crucial to implement bias mitigation techniques throughout the development and deployment of AI systems, not only at the start, right? Which would include, pre-processing the data to mitigate the biases and implementing post-processing techniques to promote fairness and, calibrate the AI outputs. Similarly, if you look for models, there needs to be tools or mechanisms and processes throughout the development cycle to ensure the transparency and the fairness. We spoke about transparency and fairness. So fine-tuning the foundation models using your own training data or using, let's say, RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation techniques widely used today to retrieve contextual data from trusted data sources can kind of ensure that the model's outputs are in accordance with the scope of your problem. Um, Organizations can consider applicable privacy laws and regulations, which could include data collection, processing, and usage restrictions that we do today also. But this will get expanded in the GenAI's scope of the problem statement. To support your privacy and security, developers may implement privacy by design features like data minimization, for example, collecting and processing only personal data that is really necessary, and for security, you could reduce, to reduce your potential vulnerabilities, you could continue using anonymization is important. Encryption and access controls can, continue to be implemented. We do that today also in our practices of software development. So here I have just taken a screenshot from this particular slide talks about the Microsoft's RAI core principles in alignment with what we spoke, and all of these six core principles is where in their day-to-day development and deployment of the entire AI life cycle, they continue to utilize these core principles and have dedicated teams, like I said before, for all of this. So, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. Okay, so what is already being done today, right? In terms of we understood the principles, we saw what kind of strategies and reach layer, what can be done. So let's couple of what are the things, what are the mechanisms which are there out there, which people are using. So four areas which are mechanism or tools available today, where you can for you to build the responsible AI products. So there is one is AI documentation, second is fairness evaluation tools, then you have RAI training toolkits, and then governance policies. So let's go into each one of them to understand the details. So in terms of GenAI documentation, the private and the public sectors both have promoted documentation of AI development process. So these documents, these strategies, document strategies will support the RAI principles of transparency, accountability, reliability, safety, fairness, non-discrimination, and professional responsibility. So there are many tools and documentation mechanisms that one can use at various layers of the system. For example, you can do it at model layer, at the data layer, at the system layer. So that's one of the things people should use. Then most companies who are coming up with public foundation models always disclose the model cards, sharing crucial information about AI models, detailing their performance, their intended use, limitations, and potential biases, enabling the users to make informed decisions regarding its deployment. To just give you an example, for AI models, you can find IBM fact sheets and even Google's model cards, which record their purpose, performance, safety, security, and provenance of these models. Microsoft data sheets can be used for data sets to document, again, data provenance, composition, collection processes, motivations, and recommended uses. Before you use anything, even say, for example, a lot of us are using OpenAI's ChatGPT models for various use cases. It's important to understand the details of the models which are already published out there, and make sure that you kind of align with and understand the constraints with which these models have been built, because you are equally liable as much as, let's say, OpenAI is. Then it's crucial to review and understand the provided documentation, like I said thoroughly. If you're planning to use any of these models, or if you're coming up with your own proprietary models, either cases, you should be able to use model cards and understand the documentation. So I encourage you to do that. Then there are fairness evaluation toolkits. The private sector has also created a variety of fairness evaluation toolkits to check the data in AI models for bias. For example, IBM's AI Fairness 360 toolkit tests the data sets and models for bias and provides recommended algorithms to mitigate identified biases. Same is with Microsoft's Interpret ML and Amazon's SageMaker Clarify is one of the functionalities that can be applied to ML models to check, the model's interpretability or how it is making certain decisions. Google's What If tool also enables the developers and the public to identify and test the predictive features in ML models without really needing the technical expertise or whether what features contribute to the bias, right? So you should be able to still analyze the fairness side or bias or discrimination side of the things. Then there's responsible AI training toolkits, which are nothing but toolkits, guides, courses, and webinars or sessions like these ones, which can help organizations train their staff to identify and mitigate potential risks of AI. A lot of organizations who are using these technologies, building these technologies, at least the big organizations, people are coming up with a lot of sessions, seminars, LinkedIn Learning, and you have a lot of resources available today. So it will be a good idea to continue to keep learning on these side of things. Um, Google's People Plus AI guidebook is one, or let's say Ethical OS Toolkit, which is developed by Institute of for the Future or Media Network. That is another one that you can take a look at to understand the ethics side of the world of this Gen AI. These toolkits kind of enable the stakeholders, such as, let's say, PMs or developers or even end users, to understand the benefits and the risks of AI and encourage discussions for responsible AI in their field of work. Microsoft Learn has come up with GenAI courses and certifications too that you can check out. It should be available on Microsoft's site or even on LinkedIn. And the other thing is governance policies. So this is one of the things which has been worked upon in the past 6 to 8 months a lot, where a lot of progress has been made. Companies are voluntarily implementing these assessments as a mechanism to reduce the legal risks that are associated with liability and negligence of an AI system that can cause harm. Um, these kind of consist of questions around evaluating the data and design risks, let's say nature and scale and likelihood of harmful aspects of the technology and the governance features to mitigate the risks. So organizations are liable to, fill these particular questionnaires to ensure that they are taking the measures which are required. There are many existing AI ethics guidelines and government acts and regulations being considered upon for updation to include the GenAI related regulatory compliance clauses. I think in the US, National AI Initiative Act mandated NIST to develop an AI risk management framework. So AIRMF is something which can be implemented by developers. So it is important for us who are building these things to learn about these frameworks. In the European Union, the AI Act is already been updated, and it requires is like a mandate that developers of high risk AI systems like biometrics or judicial or healthcare systems need to implement the conformity assessments that would help in identifying and mitigating the risks before the deployment. So these are coming from the government side as well, and industries are equally collaborating to make sure that what they kind of align with these policies. And I think, yeah, a lot of other areas where, companies, bigger, larger organizations are coming up with AI ethics boards and explainability in organizations where explainable AI is, or let's say, these ethics boards are making sure that the right policies are in place to ensure a responsible AI development happens. So what can you do, right? This is the question, and I would really, that would be a takeaway of this whole presentation. That if you are, let's say, an organization, I would say you should define your RAI strategy, which would include a set of principles like the ones we covered earlier. If an organization puts fairness and, let's say, non-discrimination as one of their core pillars or principles, then you as a leader should encourage its developers to conduct robust testing to identify the biases and correct these biases and implement continuous monitoring. This should be a very, very important part of the entire SDLC. Building compliance early on can provide a competitive advantage in the long run with evolving policies. If you are an individual working in an organization on a team where you are developing the AI systems, you should align and commit to implementing the RAI strategy in all aspects of your work. If it is not happening, and now that you are aware of these things, you should speak up and you should identify the ways to make it compliant. Say, for example, if somebody comes back and tells you it cannot be compliant due to technology or data or any other constraints, you may need to advocate that the AI system either might not be designed or implemented, right? So it is about really standing up and speaking up to ensure that we build the right stuff. Also, if let's say your org doesn't have an RAI strategy, now that you know of these things, I encourage you to speak up to your leadership to establish one. Become that become become that one um, advocate of RAI is what I would say, and get it established. Most large companies like Google or Microsoft, Amazon, IBM have a RAI implementation strategy that's publicly available. I'll definitely leave some links in the last slide for you to check out as a follow up and to understand it in more detail. Bring up these in the discussions, and you can ensure that AI systems are designed and deployed in the ways that kind of benefits and minimizes the risks. And I would just say, last but not the least, is learn, right? This is a continuously evolving space, and it will continue to evolve. GenAI, we are experimenting a lot, and how to implement it responsibly is all of our responsibility for the highest good of all, right? So, all of us own that. Okay. So yeah, this is my last slide, and here are a few resources that you can refer. to for more understanding around how big tech companies are implementing these frameworks. There is Microsoft certification on GenAI, which I would recommend, and also look out for trainings from Google and Deep Learning.ai by Andrew Ng. He's one of the key person who is in the industry is spending a lot of time on ensuring that GenAI is kind of built responsibly and also comes up with a lot of good training stuff to help people implement GenAI in the right way. I also found some good trainings on REI at LinkedIn Learning, so you can go and check out those. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it from my side. If you have any questions, you can reach me out on LinkedIn handle or drop me an email and I can reply back with answers. Hope you enjoyed listening and learning from this session as much as I did while preparing it. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.